Is now 4:07. I'll try again. My name is Ted McBride. I'm an attorney here in Salt Lake City, and this is Talk with Ted on 1640 AM, K Talk Radio here in Salt Lake. Wonderful, wonderful station, and we're down here bumping into some people that are doing other programs, and it's a great, great place, and I've got a great, great guest today, Ginger Johnson, who I came across on LinkedIn. And I just got into social media about within the last year, Facebook within the last month or two, and now Ginger is a friend of mine on both forums. And I kept bumping into things that she had posted, that she posts on LinkedIn on a regular basis. And, you know, you see a lot of things on Facebook, whether it's political or on LinkedIn, whether it's political or inspirational or marketing or otherwise. And there's a lot of great stuff, but there's also a lot of empty things, I think, where people, they're trying, they want to sort of just hijack someone else's inspirational statement and throw it out there. That's great, but if there's sort of too many of them, it can get a little bit flooded. But occasionally you come across one that's so authentic it can't be ignored. And then you see it again and again, and it kind of makes an impact on you. And so, Ginger, your mic's not on yet. I'm going to keep it that way for a few minutes, but I want to let you know that I've been watching you on LinkedIn and all the stuff that you post, and it's really, really wonderful stuff, including, and then on your Facebook, and I'm going to keep your mic off because we're going to try to build a little suspense here. But on your Facebook, there's the most beautiful quote, and it's attributed to former prophet Hinckley, Gordon B. Hinckley, about it's not enough to just be good. And I've titled today's show after that amazing line, because after that, again, on your Facebook page, and anyone that is familiar with Facebook can go look up Ginger Johnson and see the rest of it. But then President Hinckley goes on to explain what he means by that, and I think that personifies how this woman lives her life, is my suspicion. We'll see if I'm correct or if I've been somewhat defrauded by LinkedIn. I'm going to go with I'm correct. With that said, let me back up again. My name's Ted McBride. Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, a little take on the old Seinfeld sitcom that I love so much. So when I look up, I'm on Facebook Live now, which is a little bit scary. I was comfortable with radio. I'm not so sure about this. With my $5 Home Depot glasses, my daughter tells me I need to upgrade, but I lose them too much, and I get tired of buying new ones. But I want to say a few things before we get to Ginger. If anyone was listening a couple of weeks ago, we had, and really if anyone's listened to me at all, you've heard me talk about Professor Giora up at the University of Utah. And he was on a couple of weeks ago talking about his book, The Crime of Complicity, and a proposed fundamental change to the criminal liability law regarding a bystander who witnesses someone in a perilous situation and has a clear opportunity to make a telephone call to call for help. And so there was a bill proposed last year by Representative Brian King that did not pass, and I've neglected to ask Professor Giora the details about how that got stalled out and where that stood. But he told us that there was a new bill coming, and sure enough, he emailed it to me yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. I'm bad checking my email, Alan. I'm afraid of it. I need to talk to Kristen Ulmer about that. But now it's House Bill 170, and so it's back up, and he's going to keep me in the loop about what's happening with that, and we'll do our best to support his efforts to bring that legislation to Utah, which I think is a step forward for all of us. And so we'll leave that at that. I do have an invite out to him for a basketball game, Alan. We're going to the Jazz with the professor. He can teach us a thing or two. Beyond that, a couple of guests. I've got another amazing woman coming on, Ginger. I think she's a friend of yours on LinkedIn. Do you know, and your mic is still off, I'm going to keep it that way, Jessica Mass? She is, I believe, like the executive director of the Underground Railroad, which helps with trafficking, human trafficking. And she's not around a lot, but she's just another person like you that I could tell just by scrolling LinkedIn, well, wow, here's an important person. and somebody that has something to say. And I'm lucky enough to have this microphone in front of me here, and I know that you have something to say. So I'm gonna get to you again in a minute. Before that, I've got a sponsor and a shout out to my friends and colleagues at Miller Harrison. Peter Harrison is a great friend of mine that I worked with. I'll remind him that I supervised him. I didn't just work with him, I supervised him. And four of them, and they broke off from a firm that I was at a few years ago and started their own. They're HOA real estate lawyers. They're awesome guys. They're going to be sponsoring me. Miller Harrison, they're right on 3rd South. I forget the name of the building. It's right where the old Chase Bank used to be, across from the Zephyr, which is still empty, the great Zephyr, right? When are they going to do anything with that building? I went to a concert there in 1998. But yeah, it's amazing how everything else is being built, but the Zephyr is still just dilapidated. But across the street from the Zephyr on the 4th floor is the best HOA law firm in Salt Lake City. And they're guys with hearts and talent, and they're funny as hell too. And Peter's going to come on, and we're going to have a friend of Peter's join us because I'm going to put Ginger on the spot now. Do you know what my favorite sport is? She hasn't listened to one show, Alan. This is terrible. And I invited her on. Can you take a guess? It's not skiing. She is listening. See? And so I'm always trying to get some basketball players on. My goal is Donovan Mitchell. But then I got thinking, Tony Finau. I know Tony Finau. I played golf with Tony Finau. Sorry, Donovan. Tony Finau's a bigger star than Donovan Mitchell. And I want to get Tony Finau on here to talk about his charity and his work that he does, Life on the PGA Tour, the struggle that it took him to get there, the effect that his mother's death in 2012 had on him. She died in a tragic car accident coming from Nevada back to Utah in the middle of the night, and before he had really enjoyed the great success that he has now. And so I want to get Tony on, and I feel like I need to do it before the Masters because he's going to win the Masters, and then I don't stand a chance. Right? Imagine if Ginger won the Masters. She wouldn't be sitting here. Right? Let's flick on your microphone, Ginger. Enough of me hogging it. What do we got here? 2, Alan? Or 1? Go ahead, Ginger. Are you with us? Do you have a headset? Alan, can you? How are you?
I'm doing great.
You have a full head of hair.
Well, it's Insta hair.
It's beautiful. And the reason I say that is because I know that you saw my one post on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
right? Because I was searching for you on the internet, and so I could post something on the show, and so naturally I looked up your. Well, then I think it was on Facebook, so I lifted a couple of your Facebook pictures and put them on LinkedIn. I hope you didn't mind. Okay, that was great fun, and I pointed out that you're a very beautiful woman, and that in a couple of the pictures you don't have any hair, and I think that people know what I'm getting at with that. So with that intro, Ginger, take a minute or two and tell us about yourself.
Well, I am basically
Do we have her going enough?
healing right now from stage 4 metastatic cancer, and just want to double check, make sure that's happening before I start.
Can we hear her? Hang on 1 second, Ginger.
Yeah.
Okay, try again.
Ginger Johnson.
Alan, I'm struggling in my headphones here. I can hear me. What about this one? Here we go. That one. Oh, we're in business. Now I've solved
Now we
some
can-
technological problems.
Genius.
You're the fool.
There we go.
Hello, Ginger Johnson. How are you?
I'm
Start
great,
for the
Ted.
3rd time.
No, that's great.
People have heard me, but not you. So go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, right now I'm currently on the mend from stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. It's my 3rd go around with the disease. And, you know, I'm getting better every day and healing and looking forward to being able to share what I've learned with other people that I, come in contact with, because I think there's something when you go through adversity and you go through it again and again and again that you realize either you have a lot left to learn or else there's something you need to be teaching. And so part of my journey now is to share what I've learned about overcoming adversity and opposition and, just really trying to do everything that I've been able to accomplish, not always being positive, but at least with enough positivity to be able to overcome in a way that has allowed me to find a lot more happiness than I otherwise would have had, just because of the the situations that I've been. Because after going through cancer 3 different times, it's a very challenging environment. It's not the best environment to be in. And plus, because the first time I was diagnosed, I was 31 and 5 months pregnant.
Okay.
So that threw, a little bit of an interesting twist.
31 and 5 months pregnant.
Correct.
We're going to get into a few of those details,
Yeah.
but go on.
Yeah. So really, I mean, my
How old are you now?
I'm 43 now.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's been 12 years, and I've had cancer 3 times in those 12 years. I've also had several family members also have cancer, and some have survived stage 4, like my father, and others have not. So, the whole emotional gamut of that disease has been something that I've been familiar with for a long time, so it doesn't frighten me anymore.
And is this your life? Is this what you do, Ginger Johnson?
Well, I don't do cancer.
No,
we're
I
gonna
mean
cancel
inspire
that.
people.
That is my mission. That is my purpose. They say that the 2 most important days are the day you're born and the day you figure out why. And I found my why. Like, my why literally is to speak and to teach and to help others who are struggling in similar situations, whether it's cancer or just, mainstream adversity, to be able to find the tools they need to overcome and gain more resiliency. And I think that's the biggest thing. I call resiliency my superpower, but I think it's everybody's superpower. It's just a lot of, people in the times of crisis don't necessarily realize that they can utilize it, or maybe through upbringing or different things that have gone on in their lives, have forgotten that it's in them. So that, to me, is something to teach people about resiliency, to teach people about, I call it their superpowers, endurance, enthusiasm, perseverance, basically being able to
This isn't going to be a sad show, is it?
No, we
You're
don't
live.
get sad. Yeah.
I told you before we came in we're going to laugh, right?
I got my Insta hair on. We're ready.
That's amazing.
So, yeah,
I've got mine on too.
Okay, good.
I probably need a little more. You're going to have to tell me where you get it.
No, you're good.
Although,
Yeah.
I don't want red.
Yeah.
I want red. That might look funky. Wow, you're amazing. I don't know where to start with all of that. Have you ever been afraid?
Yes.
Terrified?
Yes.
With the cancer, obviously, is what I'm getting at, right? Or otherwise.
Otherwise, I've gone through.
Sure.
I've gone through enough things in my life that, be it from bankruptcies to divorce to, you name it. I've gone the gamut, and so, but I've learned that fear is something that we often. If we don't address it right away, it can consume us.
I'm going to cut you off right there because you don't have your headphones on. We're going to a commercial.
Okay.
And that, if you listen to last week's show, I had Kristen Ulmer on, Fear Specialist, and that's why you follow up perfectly with her. So I'll be right back with Ginger Johnson, and we'll find out what she's afraid of, if anything, and how she deals with it. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. It's not that wasn't the Rush music I was hoping for, but Chris told me that if we used the Rush music that they wouldn't play it on YouTube. I'd be banned from YouTube. So we've got to go with something more generic, so that'll work. Welcome back. It's 4:24 on an absolutely gorgeous day here in Salt Lake City. It's the kind of day where you could play golf down here. You could ski in the morning and play golf in the afternoon in January.
Definitely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing. And you're listening to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing. This is number 12, and it's starting out to be a good one. I've got with me here in the studio Ginger Johnson, lovely 43-year-old woman, who told us a few minutes ago that she was diagnosed with cancer at 5 months pregnant when she was 32 years old?
31.
31, I was close.
Yep.
And we're going to get into more of those details. But before you're allowed to speak again, Ginger, I printed off a few things from your websites to just kind of give people an idea of who I've got here. This is off of your LinkedIn, your bio. Ginger provides hope, inspiration, and applicable how-tos to those who desire to create a life of their own design, despite the difficulties they face. As a resiliency expert, Ginger also shares tools and techniques to overcome life challenges with determination instead of despair. So that's 2 pretty powerful sentences at the very beginning of your bio. Is that really true? Is that what you do, Ginger Johnson?
That's what I attempt to do every time I'm on a stage or in front of survivors or, doing workshops or keynotes. That is my goal.
And that's pretty amazing. And it caught my attention, your bio right away. Now I'm going to flip to a couple of posts. You have your letter to cancer, which I'm going to get to, but I'm going to put that on the side for a second because I printed off all of your recent posts from LinkedIn, and there's one that really kind of struck me, if you can bear with me here, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure.
But I want people to kind of have a little bit of a better idea of who they are listening to. It's this one. The quote is, what if everything you are going through is preparing you for what you asked for?
Right.
Okay, and as good as that is, this is the kind of thing where, people put that out there, and that's great. It's a lovely quote, okay? But what you write accompanying that quote is really what makes it so authentic. And you wrote this a week ago, and I read this a week ago, because I look at your stuff even though you don't look at mine. Right, Alan? It makes you think, doesn't it? What if all the struggle, all the soul-stretching situations that seem to be unbearable are simply sculpting you for your desired success? I bet if you take a peek at your past, you'll discover a new perspective that will pleasantly surprise you. Be careful what you ask for. Then again, ask away.
Yep.
Because you just might get all your heart's desires served on a gold platter with a side of valuable, refining lessons prepared just for you.
Amen.
Did you make that up?
Did I write that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that.
That's amazing. And that's why you're here.
Thank you.
So please elaborate.
Well, I think that's been one of the biggest life lessons I've learned is that we do not ask for what we want out of life. I mean, oftentimes we go through life and we are just being bombarded with whatever hits us. And yet we have the capability and the capacity to be able to create and design the life that we want and then to go after it.
Let me cut you off right there.
Go ahead.
So are you speaking from experience?
Definitely.
And did there come a time in your life then where you then kind of felt some fundamental change, or was it more natural? Is it in 11 years of hindsight or 12 years of hindsight? What is it that changed you?
Well, let's just say on my 40th birthday in 2015, I actually got the news that I had stage 4 metastatic disease. And so, it seems like the first diagnosis was on Halloween Day, 5 months pregnant. The second diagnosis, 9 years later, is on my 40th birthday, only it's stage 4 in the base of my skull, my spine, my lungs, and my lymph nodes. And then all of a sudden, I realized in my personal life that things weren't what they appeared to be, and essentially had to go through a very strong refining process of changing who I was and what I thought was my reality, because what I discovered was not.
But now you're 9 years into your first diagnosis.
Well, so I've got all of these things that piled up at one time in my life. They said that you're not supposed to change jobs, you're not supposed to go through divorce, you're not supposed to have cancer, you're not supposed to move your children to a new city all at the same time. And yet that's what I did. That's what I had to do. So when life gets really real and you have to decide, are you going to let this destroy you, or are you going to allow this to develop you into who you really want to become and who you really want to be? And that's what I had to choose. I had to decide that.
And I think so many of us get caught up in defining ourselves on what we've done in the past.
Right.
And it's hard to recognize even a change in you. Because I'm just sitting here, I'm listening to you, I'm looking in your eyes, and I'm hearing this 9-year gap.
Yeah.
But I just don't believe you woke up one day when you were 40 and had it all figured out, right? It's a process.
It's definitely a process. Well, and that's the thing but that's to the quote is that, if you look back, I call it heavenly hindsight. I think one day we're going to have this heavenly hindsight that's going to enable us to see all the intricacies that we thought, were just maybe happenstance or didn't really have a meaning. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, here it is. And it all put it together, to connect the dots, right? To form the final picture. So I call it, organized chaos, because we think we're just bumping around and hitting into people or meeting things or doing stuff. And then really hindsight goes, oh, had that not happened, this wouldn't have happened. And so I look at my life, and yes, there's been a lot of hardships. There's been a lot of things that, if I could go back, I might try to change. But then again, I don't know if I would, because of the things that I've learned through those experiences. I don't like going through hell, but I also like the opportunity to learn and to develop and to refine myself so that I can have greater empathy for people. I can have greater compassion.
You're trying to have greater empathy for people?
I am.
I'm afraid of that. could consume, it could be a black hole, Alan.
No, but really, because when you go through trials...
Now I'm screaming loud here.
When you go through trials and adversity, if you're able to, let them make you better instead of making you bitter, right? And that's a big let, because you have to, you kind of have to allow it to happen. And it's not easy. Like, people sometimes think, well, I can't be Pollyanna. I can't be perfect all the time and happy. And I'm like, you know what? That's true. And neither am I.
Doesn't it feel like sometimes in the public we all have to kind of pretend to be?
I took off that mask.
Good for you.
I did, because I call it the Trojan mask. Right, because hidden underneath there is a lot of anger built up. I mean, I wore the I'm fine mask for years.
And it's so silly to think that we're all not scared in this gigantic, scary universe.
There's definitely things that are going to trigger people to be afraid. And that's one of the things that, now I look, when I'm faced with things that are fearful or what appear to be fearful, I'm realizing that a lot of it is in my mind. It is. Because you think about it, when you go to a movie, and you're watching that movie, your heart rate will race, right? You'll hold your breath in the underwater scenes, but none of it is actually happening to you. And so in the same sense, because I deal with a lot of people that are afraid of recurrence. Well, now I've done this twice, and how do I deal with that? Well, it's challenging. It's not easy. I have my snot cries, where you just can't stop the tears, but you can overcome those things and learn how to basically bounce back faster each time you fall.
So my life is a little bit magical because the people that I have on add value to my life, and I really appreciate that. It's and now I looked at you and I've totally lost my thought here. But you've when you were 31 and you were pregnant, 5 months pregnant,
right.
How many did you have any children at that point?
I did. I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I was actually teaching fitness at Gold's Gym, so I was in the best shape of my life. So getting a cancer diagnosis was just out of the blue.
Was it breast cancer?
It was breast cancer.
Have you had operations?
I did. I had my first mastectomy at 6 months pregnant. The option, what they suggested was to either start chemotherapy right away or to have an abortion. And I said no to both. So because I didn't want my little baby. I didn't know how it would affect him. And trying to avoid kind of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle situation, because it's a chemical they're putting in your body.
You got to tell me quickly.
Yeah.
What happened?
So essentially, first mastectomy at 6 months pregnant, took the baby full term, delivered him. Second mastectomy after chemotherapy. Oh yeah, he's awesome. He's 11.
That's what I meant when I said get to the.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Miracle.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Continue.
So yeah, but I did the surgeries. I had to go through the unknowns. Anytime you're faced with something like that, you're going to be thrown into a world where you are not familiar with the terminology. You're not familiar with the situations.
Okay, we're going to get there. Let me back you up. We're not leaving your personal story yet.
Sure.
So that was your third child?
That was my third child.
Any more after that?
Nope.
Okay. And then you had treatment then back then?
I did. I had chemo.
And did you have a mastectomy back then? Is that
did.
The right term?
Yep.
And did you also lose your hair?
I did.
So now, I am not a woman.
No.
Obviously.
This is good,
okay?
Ted. I'm glad you know that.
But I've got to think that, okay, so, and my breasts are better suited for push-ups than for providing life. And when you lose that ability, that female ability, and then on top of that, your hair, that those two things that are important and identify you as a woman,
definitely,
then taken away from you. I can't imagine, I can't possibly ever relate to that, but that's what you're quote unquote bouncing back from. And that's probably not the right word.
No, well, let's just say I got a lot of things off my chest. So, there's
well put.
There's a lot of stuff that happened. Yeah, but, bouncing back from them, that was definitely a process. I had to learn how to look at myself in the mirror and accept not having breasts. I had to learn how to see myself for who I am and not my body. And in the world we live in, right, everything's about appearance. Everything's about how you look. And that's why everybody wears the fake masks, the Trojan masks, because they got to feel on social media. Or
even my comments in sort of advertising to the show had to do with your appearance.
You did.
Yep.
And yeah, so
but I was trying to make a point,
well,
but you're right. We live in a
we do.
Yep.
And so it's a definite process to realize that, I guess there's a difference between what we do and who we are, right? And what we look like and who we actually are on the inside, that internal beauty. And there's a difference.
So is there more to us than this physical body?
Oh, definitely.
Gotta be, right?
Definitely. I totally believe there is. And that's, I think, the beautiful thing about resiliency, and when you're talking about overcoming trials or overcoming challenges, is that if you can realize that we are divine beings having an earthly experience, it doesn't necessarily make the problems go away. It doesn't make it, it doesn't speed up the time that you have to go through the trial, but it definitely gives you a different perspective. And that's kind of what I've learned, is that it's not about being perfect. We live in this kind of fabricated perfect world, but it's not about being perfect. It's about progressing to be the best you can be.
So I can tell you that we all struggle, right,
Yes.
with our ego and our inability to see ourselves.
Yep.
And are being influenced by our emotions, etc. And I believe that you've got to have something to believe in.
I do too.
Okay. Some of my program here we've been dealing again with Mark Shurtleff on Thursdays, recovery, drug and alcohol recovery. And I see you with this illness, and we'll get into more details if you're comfortable with that. And here you are, just full of life. And the world supports you. And I see other people that are addicted to drugs and alcohol that are already dead, that can be brought back to life.
Yeah.
And they don't get the same sympathy.
It's true. And that's the hardest thing. There are so many stigmas. And I always say that cancer survivors, and I'm saying this as a 3-time cancer survivor, we do not hold the torch to suffering.
Yeah.
Right. There are other individuals that are struggling, and
yet there's nothing like it, right? Cancer. It's because it to many people it's the death sentence, and
right.
So that's the question I want to ask. So let's get right to the point. Have you been told at any point in time that you have X number of months or years to live?
No, because I would never let them tell me.
Is that right?
No, I will listen to any diagnosis you give me, but
you told them I don't want to hear that?
Yeah. Because I'm not a prognosis. Because
you're a miracle.
It's their they've got their statistics, and that's great. But there's also a thing called the nocebo. See, now everybody knows about the placebo, right? It's the sugar pill. It's the non-surgery that actually works.
Sure.
And that's why they have placebo trials, is because they do work. But the nocebo is when the same type of authority figure tells you something that is going to happen negatively, and you will believe that. So case in point, I was told that if I didn't do chemotherapy with stage 4 metastatic disease, that I wouldn't be here.
But you didn't believe that?
No, because all of the friends that I had that had stage 4 metastatic that chose to do chemotherapy and continued on that, they aren't here anymore. But my friends that maybe did a chemo with a natural holistic ability are still here, or friends that just opted to do radiation and holistic are still here.
I got to cut you off. What did they tell you when you were pregnant and you said, I'm not going to have an abortion and I don't want chemo? What did they tell you then?
They tell me okay, because I chose the right oncologist. So that's the other thing. People don't realize you can fire your doctor. you can fire people that truly do not have the same ideals that you have, because at the end of the day, these individuals, although I love their wisdom, I love their knowledge, and I do not discount the medical industry at all, they don't come home with me, right? They don't see my suffering. They don't come home with me. They don't have to deal with my kids or, with the situation of what I'm going to tell them. And so for that purpose, it's empowered. We're consumers of medicine, what my friend John Lebret calls consumers of medicine, to know who you can and not have on your team.
Yeah, and I think the medical industry is a little conflicted in that they want to, in the marketing of the medicine, they want us to believe that it's a little better than it is.
We won't go there.
That's medical malpractice. I see a lot of people that want to complain.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
Yeah.
You are delightful. We'll be right back with Ginger Johnson.
We're good.
Well, we are back. Talk with Ted Allen. Can you adjust me there? Make sure I'm... It is 4:45 on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon in Salt Lake City. January 29th, you're listening to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing. My name's Ted McBride. I'm a lawyer here in Salt Lake City. And I've got the lucky privilege of having a little bit of my own radio show that I've been having so much fun with and learning so many things from other people and about myself. And we're learning from Ginger Johnson today, who's just an extraordinary woman. And as I indicated on my LinkedIn page, if Ginger Johnson doesn't inspire you, nothing ever will. And I think that that's the absolute truth. You are a walking inspiration.
Thank you.
But before I get back to you, I had a thought coming in. I have all my good thoughts coming down State Street on my way to the office here. But a couple of weeks ago, I'm always talking about perspective and, questioning things, a little bit of questioning everything. I never think I'm right as a lawyer. And I'm afraid that when I think I'm right, I'm going to stop thinking. And so I never think I'm right. Funny thing, right? You think the lawyer always knows I'm right. I just pretend that I know what's right in court. And I've been told hundreds and hundreds of times, you're wrong, right? That's the life of a lawyer. But the essence of being a trial lawyer is about perspective and memory. And one of the things that fascinates me is science and our senses and our lack of objectivity and how we can't see. Nobody can see the back of their head. And I think about the world we live in and what we take as truths and the sort of dispute that exists in the world today between religion and science. And for me personally, there's not much of a dispute there. I see that they kind of blend together pretty well. So a couple of thoughts. I mentioned a few weeks ago that the visible universe is about 15 billion light years.
Right.
And then I'm fascinated a bit with nanotechnology
Me too.
right? And
Yes.
And is that it? Is that it? Well, we can see, with these eyes that we have, these little limited eyes that we all need corrective things done to keep them accurate on our own Earth. And I don't think that that's it. I don't think that that's the scope of everything. I don't think you can go outside of the universe and look back into it. And therefore, I think it's infinite. Just like I think something can be infinitely small. And in my business, the law business, when I prep someone for a deposition, if you're in a car accident and it's a questionable case, right, like who ran the red light or who was doing what, you're going to be asked very specific questions, and you need to give very specific answers. And an example I always give is, was the car close to you when you first saw it, okay, the other car? And I can hear the objection from the other lawyer right now. Objection. Because close is an ambiguous term.
Right.
It's a relative term. The moon is close compared to the sun. And so you have to, and because everything's relative, isn't it silly to think that things can't be infinitely small? That it's just, this is it, that we're sort of at the bottom of it. And I just like to think about peculiar things like that. And I also like to think that the universe is infinite and that you have to envision where you want to be in it.
I agree.
And so that's my segue back to you. Ginger Johnson, you were telling us that you were diagnosed with cancer. Now, when you were 31 and 5 months pregnant, was that, I'm not good with the terms, was that a terminal form of cancer?
At the time, well, they don't.
Just get a little closer.
Yeah, they don't consider. I was stage 1. Well, we'd have to go into staging. Essentially, I started out as DCIS, which means that the cancer was inside the cell, and then it broke out to stage 1. And then by the time I had my axillary node dissection, which is where they take the lymph nodes out of your body to see if the cancer spread, I was a stage 2B.
How many lymph nodes?
I had 2 out of 14 that had cancer.
Is that what you have? 14 of them? Is that what we
No,
have?
you have tons of lymph nodes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have tons, but they try to minimize that because...
That's where it spreads, right?
Well, yes, but by taking out your lymph nodes and your lymphatic system, it can damage it and cause lymphedema. And so that's a swelling of either your arm or your chest area that does not go back. like it forms with a gelatinous material that doesn't go back. So they're very careful about that.
I have a friend that's 51 that had melanoma, was cleared for 10, 12 years, flared up, terrible pain in his back. Very lucky. He had surgery. It was a golf ball size, but it hadn't metastasized yet. But he had some, and so shout out to Matt Boyle, my boy Matt Boyle.
There you go.
And he's living a good life. But he has some of those things that you talk about.
Yeah.
With the having those lymph nodes removed.
Yeah, and so and that's the thing, is they really do the best they can to try to identify the spread, and at, at stage 2B that you go through the protocols that they recommend, which is, a chemotherapy agent, and depending on where it is or whether it's not there, they'll do some radiation.
Has your treatment been here in Utah the whole time?
It has, yep.
Are you from Utah?
I am.
You indicated earlier that you moved.
Well, I moved from Davis County out here to Salt Lake County.
Okay,
so
not much of a move.
Not much of a move, but
you're a Utah girl.
Yeah, it's an hour drive, from where I was. So
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Layton.
What high school?
Layton High.
Layton High.
Yep.
What year?
93.
93. Okay. Now, after the first diagnosis, and then you had your third child.
Right.
Are you still married?
No.
Okay, and so I read that. I think that you went through a divorce at some point in time.
And right after I got diagnosed with stage 4 disease.
When you were 40?
When I was 40.
Okay. So back to when you're 31, 32. What kind of treatment did you have back then?
So I did a full year of chemotherapy. I did adriamycin, Cytoxan, and then Taxol. And both of those drugs are very interesting in that I believe it's adriamycin, AC. They call it the Red Devil.
That sounds lovely.
It's lovely. But chemotherapy itself was actually created from chemical warfare. So that's interesting.
Right out there in Tooele?
I don't know.
Is that what they do? They take them apart in Tooele? And
yeah, they realized that the cells, would die with that kind of. So it is, it's a toxic chemical, and it says that on the bag.
So to kind of sum it up, because I want to get more to your work in your current life, but to sort of kind of get through this part without getting too technical with the medical, how long of treatment did you have back then when you were 31, and did there come a time where you were, it was in remission?
Yes. So well, they call, after you do your treatment, it's kind of an interesting thing because, the first experience you have, your emotions are pretty raw. You kind of go into denial, you go into shock. You have to deal with the onset of, how do I tell my children, how do I tell my family? You go through your treatment, everything changes. Your body, is literally being killed on a cellular level in attempt to keep you alive, which is very interesting. And then as you're going through all that, you have your surgeries, and then you get done and they say, okay, go home.
So how long a period was that?
So that was...
You had your child.
I had my child.
Tell me his name. So
Brooks.
Brooks.
Mm-hmm. Brooks.
The important one, the youngest one.
Yes. No, they're all great.
That's me. That's me.
Okay.
No, the youngest is the but go ahead.
Yeah.
So Brooks.
So I had Brooks, and then I started treatment when he was about 6 to 8 weeks old. So I had a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and then this baby, and then did treatment for the entire year. I think the thing that saved me though during treatment is that on my good days in between treatments, I would go out into the community and I'd get prizes for the other patients. And then when I would go into the chemo room the next time, I would stand up and do a little halftime entertainment. I would, sing everybody a song about overcoming opposition, and talk a little bit about ways, that we can work together to support each other. And then I'd hand out presents, and every time I'd
So this
have
was
a
the
prize.
beginning of your new life, it sounds like.
It was.
Helping other people.
It was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started helping other people, wishing them a happy chemo.
A happy chemo.
Happy chemo, yeah. Just like, nobody, on your birthday, maybe you don't want to be here at happy birthday, but it's another person's desire for you to have the best day possible.
How many chemo treatments did you have to go through?
So I had to do 12, I have to remember. I had to do 8 of the Red Devil, and they have to do it every other week so that your body can survive. And then I had to do 12 Taxol weekly.
So we're talking 6-8 months?
Yeah, it's about that.
Okay, so now you're 32.
Yep.
And then what? A little bit of a normal life, I hope, for a few years, or no?
Well, it's interesting. After cancer...
It's great you don't have a normal life.
Yeah.
By the way. You have an extraordinary life.
Yeah, they call it the new normal, but it's new. It's definitely not normal. It's definitely not normal because you're dealing with body changes.
Did you think you were cured?
No, because there isn't a cure. And there isn't. That's why they're still researching it. They're looking for, they're doing it. They're doing a great job at getting new meds.
Now, pardon my ignorance.
Yeah.
My mom had breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And, quickly had some surgery, and it was sort of quickly taken care of. and maybe it was my denial, but I never really feared for her life,
Good.
and she hasn't had any problems since.
So they'll call it remission or no evidence of disease, NED, no evidence of
Okay.
disease. So that's
She's
where I
not
was.
cured either.
Well, unless somebody's got a cure somewhere that I don't know about,
Okay.
Uh,
And my vernacular's terrible, so
well,
correct
yeah.
me. But
As far as I know, the world hasn't said, "Hey, we found a cure."
okay. So now, let me see if I can quickly do the math in my head. So you're talking like 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So pre-recession, did the recession affect you?
It did.
Another thing, a financial problem. We all
Financial
felt
problem.
it.
Yep. Yep.
And so at that point, then, what were you doing? Did you have to go to the doctor every 3 months, scans? What type of protocol were you following then? And where were you, by the way? Which great facility here was taking
So I
care
started
of
at McCady Hospital,
Okay.
and I did. That's actually kind of the freaky thing for cancer survivors is because you have all of the support team, you have all these people around you. They tell you what to do, when to do it. So you've got all this structure, and then they send you home.
And then you go home.
It's like, good luck with that. So
And you've got a
you got to figure it out.
1-year-old.
Yeah, and you got to figure it out. So, I went home, and then there was so many things that transitioned. I did go back for 3 months appointments, and then I went back for 6 months appointments, and then they basically said, okay, you're good.
So then what happened next? What manifested next? Was it a physical feeling, a sickness, or what fortuitous discovery at the doctor's office? How did you discover you had a recurrence?
So, well, actually, we were backpacking in Havasupai.
Glad I asked the question. I wouldn't have guessed that, right?
Yeah, I love
And
backpacking.
what happened there?
So I was backpacking in Havasupai, and I kept having a pain in my right armpit, just kind of where the pack kept hitting onto my side.
My
And
friend had the pain in his back.
Yeah, so I just thought, oh, this is interesting. But at the time, I was working to do a grassroots mammography screening campaign with the Utah Cancer Action Network. I had printed and published a magazine for 5 years.
This is what we're all going to get to in the next hour.
Yeah, I've done all this stuff. So I was already aware, and that's, I think, once you've gone through it and you're aware of your body and you're aware of the pain and you're like, oh, okay, this is pain is different than typical pain, because cancer pain is different than just typical pain.
Did you know it?
I did. Yeah. And I went in and I talked to a friend and I just said, hey, look at this. And she just looked at me and I'm like, yeah, I know.
Was it?
So-
Was there a bump or something?
It was large mass. Large mass under.
And you couldn't see it.
I could feel it. So yeah, and that sparked, the stage 4 and it.
So
on
how
my
did
birthday.
you feel then compared to? So now you're 40. Is
Now
that
I'm
right?
40.
Okay, and so how did that feel? Now you're Brooks is 9. The other kids are 13 and 14 and 15. Okay. Are you divorced at this point?
Nope.
Still married.
Still married.
So how did this now feel? Commercial. When we come back, I want you to tell us how you felt when you were told at 40 that it was back compared to at 30 when you were 5 months pregnant, shocked with it the first time. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. Hour 2 of Talk with Ted, show about nothing. My name's Ted McBride. I'm a lawyer here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm getting kind of tired of saying it, but I think I need to in case people are just tuning in. And we're live in Murray, Utah on a gorgeous, gorgeous Tuesday afternoon. I can't wait to get back out there. It's now drive time. I remember just seems like 6-8 weeks ago it was 5 o'clock, pitch black outside. It's nice to get through that time of year. It's tough when it's that dark out. And people drive like maniacs out there, and so slow down. We're not in any rush to get anywhere, and it's hard to drive a big truck. Don't get mad at the truckers. Slow down for them. And where were we? We've got Ginger Johnson, and I was asking you a moment ago about how you felt when you were told that you had cancer the first time when you were 5 months pregnant and 31 years old. You told us about the treatment that you went through, and then at 40 years old, you were told once again. And before we went off the air, I wanted to ask you to kind of contrast those two experiences for us, or share details of both of them.
Well, by the time I'd reached 40, I'd been in the cancer industry long enough that I really wasn't afraid.
What do you mean cancer industry?
Well, it's an industry, let's be honest, right? There's a lot of money to be made in that industry, but it's also, it's the cancer world, it's the cancer industry. That's what you're in. So when I got re-diagnosed, because I already knew what it was and I'd had time to kind of process that because of, my awareness and just, doing due diligence on my own, I wasn't, the doctor looked at me and he's like, well, you're not freaking out. And I'm like, I'm not. It's not my first rodeo. I'm not freaking out. And so they couldn't do biopsies because of the space where it was. And it's interesting when you get a stage 4 diagnosis, the industry at large treats you differently because their view of you changes.
So this was your first stage 4 diagnosis?
First stage 4 diagnosis.
Which is basically, how many months do you have to live?
Pretty much. I mean,
that's in my mind. That's what. Well,
that's the commonality that's out there, but that's not true.
Really?
I mean, that's not true. So and I can't say, okay, well, just because I did this, it's going to work for everybody. I can't say that. And it's not. Anytime you're dealing with health, there's not a one size fits all type of ordeal.
It's the same with the law.
It is. It's the same with a lot of things. Even if you're, in rehab. You brought that up earlier. If you're trying to do things, some people are going to have different experiences towards healing than others, and that's kind of the thing that I think happens.
So
oftentimes.
let me stop you right there then.
Go ahead.
So 31 out of the blue.
Oh, freaked out.
Because you weren't part of the cancer industry at that point in time.
No.
Okay.
No.
So now 9 years later, because I just have a sense that you're a little different person now, even than when you were at 40 when you got hit with this second diagnosis. Am I right?
Definitely.
And so I keep getting distracted by you. I look at your pretty eyes and lose my thought, Alan. I'm sorry. But you're better prepared at 40 then. So what happened in your 30s that is strengthened you to be able to deal with it, where you just said you weren't freaked out?
Well, because, after I had gone through the first experience, I connected with a local group of cancer survivors called the Young Survivor Sisters, Lifting Hearts breast cancer group. There's great groups in the state that have online Facebook presences that, that people can get on and connect with. And so I started to learn about the disease itself. I started to learn about healing versus fighting.
Yeah, when you say healing, isn't that what you were doing at McKay-Dee, or did you end up at Huntsman? Were you up to?
I started at McKay-Dee and then I ended up at Huntsman.
And so when you say learning to heal, something in addition to the medical treatment that you're getting?
Right. Well, so when you're first diagnosed, your body literally goes into fight or flight, right? Because you're just in adrenaline overload. I mean, everything. If you freak out, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because you're not expecting that. Most people aren't expecting that. So you do freak out. But the problem that they have is when you stay in fight or flight and you're using all that adrenaline, you're actually doing a disservice to your body, because then your adrenals get fatigued and then you can't sleep and you get tired. I mean, it really can. The studies show that if you stay in fight or flight for a long period of time, it's disabling.
And you were doing that
body.
when you were 32, 33?
Well, yeah, because I didn't have for me in my personal life, I didn't have a support system that enabled me to rest.
Yeah, when you say support system, because you mentioned these groups and the websites and such.
In my house. Let's go with that.
What's that?
In my home. Let's do that. Outside my home, yes, great people.
But support system, I mean, just other people similarly situated?
There are a lot of people similarly situated, but again, once you go back into your own home, your own domain, if the influences that you have in your own home aren't as supportive as what you need, it can be very challenging.
Explain that for me in a little more detail. You're being a little vague with
I'm
me
being
there.
vague.
To, right? Am I right? You're being a little vague. And you don't have to share details that you don't want to.
My experience was that my spouse at the time never went to any of my treatments. And then because of the service projects that I was doing and things that I was involved with, essentially what happened is that I created companies and businesses and published a magazine. I did a lot of wonderful things, but in my home, the support wasn't there. So because the support wasn't there and because I was working while someone else who should have been working wasn't working, and there's a lot of stress that was in my life that a lot of people didn't see, nor did I allow people to see, because I was wearing my Trojan mask, that everything's fine and that Ginger can do this. So by the time,
it's hard when you you have a marriage and you have kids and you have all of that invested in that, and to come to grips with some honesty, but good for you.
Well,
But,
that's what you have to do. I mean, so when I got re-diagnosed and I, realized
this is the third one now?
this is the second still, but some
Okay.
things came out about my now ex-spouse that did not sit well with me, and so that led to divorce. And so I'm healing from stage 4 cancer while going through a divorce, while moving my children, while having to step out of my entrepreneurial space and having to get another job, while
Why not just give up?
well, because I have children and I love them and I love my
Of course
life.
I say that.
Yes, no, we don't give up. Johnson's
No choice, right?
No, that's not a choice. It isn't, because it could have been easy. I could have given up. I mean, there was hell. It was hell. But
Were you depressed at any time?
I asked God to take me home at one time.
That answers that question.
Yeah, because it was that bad. It was that emotionally plaguing. Now, physically, my body was still having, this disease, but emotionally it was
Now
it
back
was
to your
horrible.
quote about all the hardships that you go through to get where you are.
Yep. I'm here
Part
because
of,
of
part
it.
of that. You're talking about part of that.
I am. And that's the reason why it's shifted my perception, right? Is that I do not enjoy adversity, but now when I'm faced with adversity, I look at it in a different way, because I really do believe that I said I could have stopped. I could have given in. I could have given up.
What can't you take on now
Well,
after
anything.
having to deal with that? But do we have to go through that to be able to develop that kind of courage?
I don't think everybody has to go through every person's life, I feel, has different elements in it that are specifically for them, if they choose to allow those elements to strengthen them. I'm not going to say that it's a perfect. My life is going to be compared to another. I don't believe that. I don't believe there's a one size fits all. I said that.
Your human experience is pretty unique to you.
It
isn't
is. It's got to be mine. And honestly, I really want anybody else to have to live what I've lived through.
Are
Honestly.
you glad where you are right now?
But I am. I'm so glad.
Most
where I
people
am
are
right
running around my program.
You have to be.
You get that joke?
You get to
Get
be
that
with
joke,
Ted,
Ginger? You don't
right?
Even, you don't
Here we
even
are.
listen.
I
She's-
listen, but no, it's true though, because you think about it, and it's you look at the people, and the people that I look to for mentors or for inspiration, and they have been through really hard times. It's very rare to find someone who was raised, with a silver spoon in their mouth, that's never been through adversity,
I
and have them
think of
achieve
Tiger
a great
Woods
thing.
because I'm an idiot and everything's a sports analogy. But you think about Tiger Woods before his great downfall,
Right.
he looked perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, he's as flawed as the rest of us.
Everybody has their things. I mean, and that's the truth. Is
And I'd say about Tiger Woods, give me $1 billion and see how I act. right?
But then again, I mean, and that's the thing. There's so many variables that play into life. But if you can take your own unique situation and look at it in a different way and say, okay, how can I make this better for me? How can I shift that? And it
aren't
takes
you talking
time.
about experience too? So could
It
you have
is.
done this when you were 30 years old?
You know what? Not with stage 4, because back then I didn't have the mindset. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have.
You hadn't suffered enough.
Well, you know what? That's actually true, because everything you go through and that you overcome builds your strength. And I guess that's my thing that fires me up, is so many people, and I'm going to say especially women, but I know men deal with this too, is that they go through these hard times and then all of a sudden they feel like they're worth less. Right? Somehow they're worth less, but that's not true.
Or define ourselves by our past mistakes.
True. And everybody has a backstory. I know that. Everybody has a backstory. I have a backstory, but when you can look at the backstory and say, okay, what did I take away from this? What did I learn from this? And then actually apply what you learn, right?
It's not enough to just be
it's
good,
no,
is it,
no,
Ginger
no. It's not enough to
Johnson?
be good.
Oh, it's coming around.
Yeah,
here
yeah.
now.
And I actually had that moment one day. I was sitting in my office. I had all of my awards, all of the things that I've done, my box of Cheerios that I was on the back cover of, and all this stuff that I was doing was behind me. And I sat there and I just thought, but what's in front of me? Like, I've got all this stuff behind me, and that's what I did, and that's great, and that's awesome. But what am I doing? Because you can only sit back and rest on those laurels, if you will, for so long before you realize that that's great, but unless I'm actively continuing to live, right, back to your point, you can literally be dying.
And all we have is the moment.
All we have is the moment.
It's all we ever have.
It's true.
And the beautiful thing about it is that it's always with us.
It's true.
Right?
And if you can be ridiculously present,
and it's hard.
Yeah, it is challenging, but if you can stay in today, right? If you can stay in today, and I've had to learn that. I've learned that from many experiences and
What do
siblings.
you do to
and
help you
different
do
things.
that?
Stay in gratitude. I stay in gratitude as much as possible. And even, even when I start to get overwhelmed, because I get overwhelmed still, I realized when I...
Even Ginger Johnson gets overwhelmed.
No, I get overwhelmed.
I don't believe you.
It's true. I have little PTSD episodes that I didn't realize were PTSD, but it's traumatic things around, when I start businesses or when I start to do things again, I literally go into a PTSD mode because of how I was conditioned previously in my space. And so, but the beautiful thing... I
love being stressed out.
No.
Because if I'm not, I feel like something's wrong.
Well, but see, there you go. You become comfortable being uncomfortable.
Being motivated by it. I say that a little tongue-in-cheek. I'm getting better.
But that's what happens is so many of us have become comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right? And so then when you step into comfort, like I remember the first time that I sat there and I'm like, what am I feeling? And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is peace. And I was like, I'm feeling peace. I'm like, I haven't felt this for how many years?
Do you know what I do sometimes is try to look at all the details around you.
Right.
That you don't see.
And it's good to see
in this room
different ways. Yeah.
Because there's so much that we don't see.
Well, and if
in front of us.
If you ask people, if you have close friends or, and you can ask people, hey, how do you see this? You're going to get a fresh perspective. Now, you have to be willing to be open to receive that fresh perspective.
And that's the job of a lawyer because I can have a jury tell me, you're wrong.
There you go.
More likely a judge. I've had plenty of them do that.
But, having a willingness to learn, I think, is key. If you can be willing to learn, willing to adapt, and willing to shift and change who you are, let go of that ego, you step into a greater space.
Not enough people are able to do that, and that translates into the politics. Because everybody thinks they're right in the politics, and nobody can just be humble, be willing to change, admit that they're wrong.
When the fake news stations are
I don't want to go to this commercial, but I have to. We'll be right back. Welcome back. That is not my original lick there. I'm going to have to maybe do a little of my own, Alan. I was really hoping for the Brush, the AC/DC, but thank you, Chris, for the generic stuff. I'm back. My name's Ted McBride. It's 5:23. Is that right? Not loud enough. On Tuesday afternoon, folks are driving home. I'm sure Route 15 is packed. It's a dangerous road. Be careful on it. You're listening to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, and I've got a very inspirational woman with me right now, Ginger Johnson. We've been having a ball on the record here as well as off. And very briefly, before I get back to her, I've got, we're starting to get some commitments ahead of time, so I'm not winging it week to week, but I've got a great guest coming up in another week or two. Well, next week is going to be Peter Harrison, a lawyer here in town. Friend of mine, sponsoring the show, great guy, hilarious guy. We're hoping to get a professional basketball player to call in and say hello because that'll get me a little closer to Jimmer and Donovan Mitchell. But that's Frank, I want to say Johnson, but that's Ginger Johnson. Lone Peak kid, played with TJ Haws. It'll come to me. But then I'm going to have my cousin on. I've got a cousin that's a world-famous magician. He's a very peculiar man, and he's the most famous magician you've never heard of. And I say that because he's always listed in the top 10 magicians in the world, and it's David Blaine and Siegfried and Roy, all of them. And my cousin's always there. He's a legend, a living legend. He's been amazing since we were small kids. He's gifted like you can't believe, and he is deep. He's a philosopher. He's like a corporate motivator, and he has never been anything but a magician. And his brother got married, big fancy wedding, and Jeff was doing a show, and my whole family, we had our head in the delicious food. Oh, the fish and a potato shaped like a pear, the most delicious thing. While my cousin's up there doing his thing, 250 people are paying attention to him except my family. We've seen it 100 times. But he's going to be on, and he's awesome. But right now I've got a little bit of another magician, but there's no illusion about Ginger Johnson. You're the real deal. And you've been telling us a process of suffering and healing, and we're not going to have enough time because it's already 5:26, and so I'm going to jump ahead. You had your first diagnosis when you were 31, 5 months pregnant, your first diagnosis of cancer. You then had a mastectomy, 8 or 9 months of treatment, a period of about 8 years where you didn't have a recurrence. Then you described feeling a pain in your back, and then at 40 years old, married in a difficult marriage, pow, it's back.
Yep.
And at that point, you're equipped to deal with it. You're not freaked out. And so I'm going to jump ahead because we've only got so much time. It came back again.
It did. Dang
I guess it never left, right?
Well, so the results I got was July 9th, 2015, got diagnosed, birthday.
So we're already 3.5 years out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I got re-diagnosed. So I got
Oh, that was the 40.
Well, that's the 40.
Gotcha.
And then my disease had been, quote unquote, resolved. That's what the scans showed.
Did you have more chemo then?
No. Nope.
So what did you do for the stage 4?
So I did do radiation. I did high beam radiation in the area that they needed to because surgery wasn't an option. And so I worked with radiation oncologist up at Huntsman Cancer Institute. Great
place.
facility.
We're lucky to have
wonderful.
it here.
I did radiation, and then I chose a holistic approach. So
Really?
I did high dose vitamin C.
Did you turn down any traditional medication that was, in other words, did anyone say do chemo or anything that you said no to?
I did.
Again.
Well, yeah, I did.
Where do you get inspired from? What's driving these decisions? Your heart?
Actually, your heart has to be in everything you do because you're going off faith, right? And you're going off of what you need to do for your life to live. So the choices that you make, they're monumentous. They're not these little tiny things that, am I going to wear pink socks or green socks today, right? This is how am I going to live, how I'm going to do this. So the interesting thing is that the prior years I had spent studying in all the National Institutes of Health archives, evidence-based studies and reports on ginger, on cumin, on, frankincense, on all of these different things, that there's actually documented studies done about how a lot of the natural products have health indicators.
Buried, locked away in the basement of an FDA building
you can
somewhere?
find them. You just have to start. You have to become, like my friend Mark Lebret says, a consumer of medicine. You have to start doing the research yourself.
But now some of these things that you just described
Mm-hmm.
aren't what I think of as being sort of traditional medicine. It's not a
That's
pill
not
being prescribed.
No, that's not traditional. Those are all holistic, side things. So I did the radiation. I did.
So this is all after you're 40 now. You're
Yes.
into the holistic. None
Yep.
of that before?
No. I mean, I just didn't know.
Sure.
Because what you don't know, you don't
You're
know.
evolving into the
Right.
Ginger Johnson we have here
That's
in front
right.
of us.
If you don't know, you don't know. So I had learned, I had thought, okay, we're going to eat clean. We're going to do these things. But I didn't know to what extent. I didn't know about vitamin C. I didn't know about these other things. And again, one side does not fit all. And I honestly worked with an integrative oncologist at the Huntsman Cancer Institute through this whole thing. So it wasn't just I went cold turkey and said, oh, I'm going to go off and listen to every, person that says they've got something that can heal cancer. Because that's not how you can't live that way, because there's a lot of interesting things out there, right? So, but anything that's evidence-based, that has a history, that has information about whether it came out of Europe, whether it was in the National
Do you help
Institute of
people with
Health.
this information now? Do you pass this on?
I only pass it on if they're asking, but not as, hey, I recommend, because to me, I'm not a physician. That's
It's
not
kind of an individual thing.
Yeah, that's not my space, right? And that's not my place to tell somebody.
So that's not how you're helping people currently.
No, because I mean, they know what I've done. So, and if somebody asks me, hey, did you do vitamin C? I'll say, well, sure, I did vitamin C. Well, did that heal you 100%? I can't tell you, because I did a whole bunch of other things together. So for me, it's not
hard to measure the effect.
It's hard to measure the effect. So, but I did do a lot of those different things. The biggest thing, though, I think that I did this time, or when I was 40, and that I've continued to do now, getting re-diagnosed last spring, actually on my son's graduation. I don't know what's up with holidays.
So it's just
crazy.
this last spring?
Yeah, last spring.
10 months?
Yeah, I just held our second Survivor Soul conference in Salt Lake
We're
City.
going to talk about that in a minute.
Yep. And I was feeling run down, and I noticed that I had something in my neck, and I found it. I just felt it, and I knelt down in my closet in my room, and I just screamed.
Did you cry?
I cried. I was mad. I was really mad. And then I went into this interesting space of, okay, it's my turn to go. Interesting space.
And you hadn't been there before, even though you'd suffered with it?
No, I never thought I would ever get to that point.
Other than your depressive point.
Yeah, I mean, but that was because I was dealing with hell and a divorce. I mean, it was bad. So
now this goes a little counter to what I thought you were going to say, because now it sounds like now the third one is.
Third one
this
is
one's
big.
hitting hard. It
This
sounds
is big.
like.
Well, see, that's the thing, is because every time they hit, like the second one is like, oh, okay, no big deal. We'll just go get this done.
Yeah, and now this one's different.
And this one was different because of the fact that I felt like I had gone through so much already. And it was more that my soul was tired. I don't know if you ever got to that point where like everything is just like, oh my gosh, my soul is tired.
No, it's not, Ginger.
It was. It was. Because this time it was in my brain. It was in my liver. It was in, it's back in my, cancel. I'm going to cancel that statement. It is healing from my brain. It is healing from my liver. It is healing from my spine and my lymph nodes. And I was just tired. I had just gone through all of this stuff. I had just transitioned. I just got free from the narcissistic marriage I was in. I had just, finally in this space of peace, like I was mentioning, and then it's back. And I'm like, what? And so it was hard. It was challenging.
You talk about it like it's past history.
Well, it was.
But this you're talking about 8 or 9 months ago.
Yeah. But I had to do brain surgery. I had to do brain radiation. I didn't realize brain surgery is such a big deal. It is, apparently.
Okay.
It's a big deal.
Well, I had an idea. I think you didn't tell me anything I didn't know.
Well, I got in trouble because I didn't realize it was such a big deal, and I was trying to do too much, and the nurse yelled at me and said, no, you can only go up your stairs and go to the mailbox. So
I'm sorry. Let me rein you in a little bit because this is all very recent. I don't know anything of these things about you.
Yeah,
we didn't go over.
No, we didn't go over this.
I got your permission to go into some things.
Yeah.
So that but now that's real recent history.
Yeah, that was last year.
You talk about it like it's over.
It is.
Are you still treating?
Nope.
But you'll always be evaluated.
Well, yes.
hang on. I got to get to my next. I got to back up on that one because when I say, "Are you still treating?" From what you've already told me, I asked that question with a narrow-minded thought in my mind about, formal medical treatment.
Yeah, I did do formal medical treatment. Again, I'm very smart in being evidence-based medicine, right? What's going to help? What's going to do that? And I actually had to do emergency brain surgery because the way that my brain, the tumor was here on my right side, it was pushing into my brain. It's not in my brain. It's not on the skull. It's actually in the dura. And so the dura mass, which was pressing in. So they went in and they did emergency brain surgery. And I got a shout out to the U of U. They were hilariously fun. The nurses and the brain I can't.
Good time there at the U with brain surgery. Don't be afraid of that.
Give me on some fentanyl. We'll have party. No, so it was really a good time because the nurses were amazing.
That's when that drug is needed.
Right? It was actually needed. But that place was amazing. They did a really. It was just fantastic. But
now, did that come out in? Was it still encapsulated?
There was some that still stuck. They didn't want to pull it. I guess you have this thing called a sinus that runs along the top of your head. I had no idea. I'm learning so much about your brain. But they didn't want to mess with something in there, so they took out a big mass and then they did the radiation. But the interesting thing is that when the physician, the doctor, the surgeon took out the mass, she told my parents that the mass was angry. Another term for inflamed. But I thought it was so key that she used the word angry. I thought, because I tend to do the whole body mind, whole approach.
Get that anger out of your
Gotta
head,
get the
right?
anger out of my head, yeah.
Perfect. I should go get a little surgery.
Please don't. It's not. It's not that fun. Please don't.
Know. They'd probably have to cut a bigger hole in my head than yours.
So anyway, but they took the mass out, and then I had to do radiation. So this is the beautiful thing about last year, is I was humbled more than I've ever been humbled before in my life, because I was on anti-seizure meds. I couldn't drive. I had to be on heavy pain medicine. And so there was so many things that took me down to a level of refinement that I've never experienced before in my life. And at the time, it was challenging. I'm not going to lie. It was hard. It was challenging. But I had to learn how to let other people serve me. And that was something at that level that I'd never experienced before in my life, because I was always serving everybody else.
Think about that as growth, that you need to learn how to be able to receive. And you're capable of giving so much away.
Yeah. Well, you have to learn how to receive. I mean, and that was my lesson, I think, for last year. So I look at it and I go, wow, in hindsight, again, you got perspective, you got heavenly hindsight. You can look back and go, okay, I needed to go through this experience so that I could have the level of empathy for people who are also in that space, who are saying, my soul is tired and I've been through hell and I don't know how I'm going to keep going. And I have to rely on everybody. So I feel like a loser because I'm relying on everybody else. I can't even take my kids to school, or pick them up. I'm using neighbors for food, for everything.
I got to cut you off right there, because I think in this world, in our country, we're all striving for security.
It's true.
Right? And there's security in money, only so much.
Yep.
But there's greater security in relationships. And then what you just explained is, despite the fact that you built those relationships, because those didn't spring out of nowhere, that you even expressed some reliance to then rely on those relationships, which is your security. And what a fascinating thing. So you learned how to
I learned how
receive help.
receive. And it was humbling, and it was
and
joyous.
You're a 43-year-old strong, 42 at the time, I suppose.
Yeah,
or,
42, yeah. Am I 43?
Wow.
We're getting there.
That's what you told me earlier.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. You look 27.
I'll own it. Thanks.
It's now 5:37, and this is really not where I thought that this program was going to go. I thought it was going to be more about sort of what you're doing to help other people, but it just struck me that your story that you just told is what will help other people, and I'm sure that everything that you do is part of just telling that story. And so it's just kind of funny how it came around, because I didn't really think that it was going to go like that, and it's a beautiful story, and we're not done with it yet. Wow. I'm a little bit blown away, and so I've got to, because we're running out of time. We got another segment, but you've spoken about some organizations and you being an entrepreneur, and even some of those accomplishments. It sounds like that maybe you didn't have support at the time for that, and you're across from me right now, just bursting with brightness. Okay, and so tell us a bit about those endeavors where you've helped other people and continue to help other people.
Well, prior to the divorce and prior to everything I had done, I'd worked heavily in the state to help promote awareness about cancer resources that are available here. Because again, if you don't know, you don't know, right? So I
think about people that live in remote places. We're so lucky to live right near that.
It's
facility.
true. Well, and that's the beautiful thing, is that when you are given the opportunity to know something and can be valued to somebody else, I think it becomes inherent in you to share that, and it doesn't have to be this massive promotion. It doesn't have to be, it can be as simple as a service of just saying, hey, this is going on. And it's interesting that we typically do that in the world. Like if something's on sale, everybody's going to, oh, it's on sale. Let's go tell it's on sale. And it can be the same way if you have something, of value that can share with someone who's suffering. However, you have to be careful, because when you're approaching someone with information, you have to realize it's not about you. It's never about you. It's always about them. Because if they're not ready to receive...
And yet, it's your experience that you're trying to share to help.
It's my experience, true. But you can, and maybe you've had those experiences before where you're trying to tell somebody, oh my gosh, and they're looking at you like, I don't care. Because they're not connected with you in that space. So, and that goes with everything. You could put that in a sales format, right? Sure. People don't know, or they don't care about what you know.
You're trying to sell happiness and dealing with this unbelievable...
Well, not necessarily happiness. I'm trying to share with them, hey, if you choose to do it, look at it this way, it might help you, but you can never again, say 100%, because it's up to them to choose and decide. And plus, based on their backstory, they have to be willing to have, the experiences that have led them to the point to be open to want to learn. So you can never force information, right? You can lead the horse to water, you can't make him drink.
I usually have the good line going into the break, but not this time. We'll be right back, and you're going to continue to tell us how you're helping people. And I'm going to bring you back to what you said, Ginger, at the first segment. Happiness. Your goal was to find happiness, and that it was a challenge. And you're smiling right now. So we'll be right back. It's not Stairway to Heaven. It's the generic Guns N' Roses. It is. It's the generic Guns N' Roses. Thank you, Chris, for the generic Guns N' Roses. We are back. It's 5:44. You're listening to 1640 K Talk, Salt Lake City, Utah. I love AM radio, and now we've got a podcast going. I see we're live streaming on Facebook, and so you can share this with your 4,500 friends on Facebook.
Woo woo.
Ginger, I see how many friends you have. You have lots of friends, which is great because that's your support. I've got with me Ginger Johnson. I'm not going to repeat anything because if you haven't been listening, you're just going to have to rewind and take it from the top. But before I go back to Ginger, I'm going to read your letter to cancer. Is that what this is?
It is. Looks like you're missing a page, though.
Am I missing a page?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm not going to read it.
I'll post it on my Facebook.
I could pull it up on the internet.
Yeah.
It's on there. I'm missing a page of it, but you wrote a letter to cancer. You're just an amazing, amazing woman. You've been telling us how you have suffered and grown, and I want you to continue to tell us that what you're doing now to help yourself and other people.
Well, my biggest focus right now, besides my full-time employment, is to start reaching out and doing more speaking engagements, whether it was cancer survivors or other people facing adversity. I created the Survivor Soul Conference.
What do you mean by that? So more than just the cancer?
Well, adversity doesn't just apply to cancer.
Part of what you said earlier, that you don't have the monopoly
the
on
torch,
suffering.
yeah, we don't hold the torch to suffering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. So really, I mean, that's the thing is whether you're dealing about resiliency in a corporate structure, say a project fails, and how are you going to handle that? Whether you're dealing with working with challenged individuals, or maybe there's youth or groups, this information I think can be applied full spectrum. But for me, my biggest vision is to see how many cancer survivors, how many survivors' souls I can empower. So I created a project called the Survivor Soul Project. And it's kind of been something that I've been working to build.
Is there a website?
There is a website, survivorsoulproject.com.
Simple enough.
Simple enough. And I'm looking to, to build that, to get sponsors for that, to be able to reach out to cancer survivors around the nation. When I created it in 2018, my goal was to reach 1 million survivors by 2020. I didn't realize that I'd have to go through cancer again. So I kind of had to slow down everything, right?
Did you get to count yourself again?
Yeah, I got,
Right.
points for me. But no, so I mean, that is my bigger goal though, is how can I reach as many cancer survivors as possible? Because
And when you say reach, what are they signing? Do you have some central repository of information that you can help share with people, or what is it that you're?
Yeah, so at the Survivor Soul Project, it also has information about the conference from last year. Again, I need to update all this information because it's just been a whirlwind of activity since.
You got to take care of yourself, Ginger,
I do.
instead of everybody else.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing. You have to stand in integrity. So you can't stand on the stage and teach self-care and then not do it. That's hypocrisy in its finest. So standing in integrity. And that's why, for me personally right now, I'm out of radiation. I'm healing. My body's not in any pain. I go in for checkups and scans to find out, when it's going to be completely gone again.
Do you have a vision for yourself in 10 years?
I have a vision for myself this year.
20 years?
Yeah. Oh, I'll be here.
30 years?
I'll be here. Yeah, definitely. And that's part of the training that I do. Is I'm actually an Ideal Life Ideal Life coach, certified coach. I call it Soul Vision. But essentially what I work with individuals to do is to help them really claim what they want out of life and then create their own future out of it. So when I did my TEDx talk about chasing after miracles, I identified various ways that you can basically have mechanics of hope in your own life. And one of those is to predict your future. Predicting your future is essentially the best way to create it, because when you're in charge of what you want to see happen, then all of a sudden the universe, if that's who you attribute that to, or God, has a clear plan of what he can help you achieve. If you don't know what you want, then you're going to get whatever you get. But if you've actually had an opportunity to sit and think, okay, this is really what I want, and then you put energy behind it, you put focus behind it, you put all of these things behind it, and then start beta testing it. It works for Apple. Why doesn't it work for us? They beta test everything, and we have to pay for the beta test, and then they make more money.
Dumb that down for me a little bit.
So, for example, iPhone puts out a new phone, and they'll say, well, this is they'll send it out, and it's a beta, right? We as consumers stand in lines for 8 hours to go get the new iPhone or whatever it is, only to find out that it still has bugs. But yet we still use it. They use our feedback to fix it, right? And then they make more money because then they upgrade it and we go buy another one.
Never trusted him.
It's a beta test.
Steve Jobs was overrated.
Well, either way, we can beta test our own lives. We can say, okay, I want to do this. I want to achieve this. And by giving ourselves permission to be human, to make error, not to be perfected
So that you can
and
have
everything.
your dream can include some flaws.
It can. Because
Has to,
it has
doesn't
to. It has to. But that's the beauty of it, is it allows you to
But if we're wearing that
create.
mask,
If
if
you're
we're wearing that
wearing the
mask, how
mask.
come we dream with the mask on?
If you're wearing the mask, you'll always be limited, because you'll always have this persona that everything has to be perfect and I have to be perfect to the world. When you take off the mask and you're able to look at yourself in the mirror, I mean, when was the last time you looked at yourself in the mirror in your eyes and did not look away? When you're looking at yourself to see yourself, to see not,
When you don't feel good about yourself, you don't see. So I could shave, brush my teeth.
you don't
I
want to
see
look.
myself.
You don't want to look. So part of the process of, becoming more resilient and accepting and owning yourself, and again, it's a process. It's totally a
Because
process.
you got to come from the floor. It's got to be from being knocked down.
It honestly does,
Because
because
there's no zillions, right? It's free.
it's free. But you stand back up, and every time you stand back up, that's not a sign of weakness. Starting over and beginning again is not a sign of weakness. It's a true display of strength,
Yeah, isn't that the
because-
truth? And I've seen that in people. I know exactly what you're talking about.
right? It really, but once you claim that, now you have to shift from becoming a self-critic, which everybody is.
And that's always the past.
That's the
It's always the
past,
past.
to a self-coach, which the self-coach is, you can do this. Yesterday was hard, but look what you learned. You can do this today. And again, staying present in today so that you can step into tomorrow without having to fear it, but also with the knowledge that you have that, hey, I made it this far, right? We've made it this far, 100%. We have made it to today, this far. We've done it. Maybe we're not perfect at it, but we have done it. And that gives us strength and more confidence. Confidence is what comes from more resiliency. And then when you go forward, you're not as afraid because you're like, I can do this. I can do anything.
What about your faith? Because I know on your Facebook page, I spoke early in the show, you had a beautiful quote from President Hinckley.
Yes.
And what role has your faith played in your recovery, your happiness, I'll say?
Well, my faith is everything in my happiness. My belief in God and in Jesus Christ and in the power of the atonement of Jesus Christ, being able to realize that this earth life is not the end, and that we have the potential, to achieve greater things than we can even imagine here on this earth life. I mean,
In all your struggles, because you shared at least one very, very low moment with us earlier, was your faith ever questioned?
I was never mad at God, and I never questioned my faith. I was more frustrated, thinking, have I not learned everything I'm supposed to learn? I was more frustrated with myself that I hadn't yet learned
Sounds like
all
you're being
those
critical
things.
of yourself.
Well, and I was, but
a hard
see,
balance,
but
isn't it?
that's when you step into that space, because again, you have to recognize what you're doing, which is what I did. Then you can identify, okay, how am I being self-critical? You identify it. Then you can say, okay, what's the solution to that? So you take a logical approach,
This
which
sounds exhausting.
it's not, because you're so in emotion that stepping into logic sometimes is so refreshing, because emotion can overwhelm. But the opposite of that emotion would be logic. So as soon as you step in and you change your perspective, right? Step out of emotion, step into
You got to
logic.
be able to identify the two.
You do, but that can be learned. That can be learned.
I think a lot of people don't know that.
No, because they're just living it.
And they think that they're reasoning themselves through everything when that may not be the case.
That may not be the case. Yeah.
We're running a little bit low on time, but I'd like to I'm going to circle back to just one philosophical point. I was talking about the universe
Yeah,
and religion and science. Have you ever seen a total eclipse?
I have.
If you've never seen a total eclipse, you've got to see a total eclipse, because I drove to, did you see the last one?
Mm-hmm.
I went up to Boise. I went up north of Boise, and I hopped a barbed wire fence with the permission of a cowboy and climbed the top of a hill with a couple of people, and it was truly amazing. And the thing that really fascinated me more than anything is, what are the odds that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun and the sun is 400 times further away than the moon? Because they match up identically. And in this scattered, endless, chaotic universe, there was that it couldn't have been a coincidence, is what I was thinking,
Right.
sitting looking at it. That most amazing. I don't have words for it, but that just struck me like that's no coincidence.
No, I think there is a purpose and a plan for each one of us in our lives.
And if you don't have it, you're dead already, aren't you?
Well, there's a lot of people that don't believe that are still living. I've just found personally for me in my space that as I have stepped into a space of greater gratitude for the knowledge I have of God and for the awareness I have about the plan that he has for my happiness, the plan of salvation, or it's called the plan of happiness, that as I step into that space, I find greater happiness because my focus isn't on necessarily the things of this world. It's on how can I, basically up-level myself to be more in tune with, what I call the Spirit of God. And as I do that and as I shift into a spiritual space, everything changes. Your perspective changes because I call it earth stuff. We're just dealing with earth stuff.
And you are here right now on Earth, aren't you?
I am. So I deal with it. But I also have the vision in my mind of where I would like to be, and that's closer to God.
You're an amazing person, and I know that you touch and inspire everybody that you're in contact with, whether you know it or not.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you don't ask for too much help, so I wouldn't feel too guilty about that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Ted.
Yeah, and good luck with your health, as with the rest of us, right? Because you never know what tomorrow can bring.
That's true.
I'm always a little freaked out about the people that die by some really strange thing. And one that always stands out to me is a woman in Chicago just a few years ago, and she walked the same path to church or her job every day, and she passed a church. And on the top of the church was a gargoyle. And a gargoyle broke loose and fell off and hit her on the head and killed her.
Yeah.
And so you never know when you're going to get hit by a gargoyle just walking down the street.
It's
right?
true. Well, you never know. I mean, and I think that's the gift of life is that if you can choose, and it's a choice, and you have to choose it over and over again. If you can choose to live in the present in a space of gratitude and do the best you can with what you have where you are, right? That's all any of us can do.
And isn't it the easiest place to be happy?
Is
in the moment?
When you're in the space where you know your life is being fulfilled and you're doing the best you can with where you are, then you're able to have a greater happiness.
Best you can.
The best you can.
Period.
Yeah, just do the best you can. I feel that God will, look at each one of us in our own individual spaces, and he loves us and he knows us, and he wants us to do the best we can. And he understands. I think that's the beautiful thing, right? He understands everything about your backstory that nobody else does. And so there is mercy there. There is grace there.
It's hard being human sometimes, right? Because we're flawed and we're not perfect and we try. We have standards. I always admire the LDS culture because, I think that the LDS culture gets criticized because they try to create a higher standard. And it's always difficult. You're setting yourself up for criticism when you try to create a higher standard. And I don't think anybody should be criticized for trying to set a higher standard.
Well, and Eleanor Roosevelt, she said it, I think, perfectly to basically quote what she said. She says, you might as well do the best you can and go ahead and do what you want, and I'm paraphrasing, because you're going to get criticized anyway. So regardless of what the world says.
You can't please everyone.
You can't please everybody. You just go and do the best you can with what you have. And by doing that, and living in a space, it becomes your truth. And when you're standing in your truth and it's an authentic place of love and harmony and peace, everybody knows it.
I had a couple of pictures of you commenting on your physical appearance coming into this program, but aside, I was right. You are just an incredibly beautiful woman.
Thank you.
Inside and out, and it's delightful to meet you. And we might have to have you back on, Ginger, because there's more to talk about.
Love it.
I'm going to follow you on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I hope you follow me.
I will.
I'm going to be watching. Ginger Johnson, smile when you go home tonight. Hug your kids. Love your life. And I'll be back on with Mark Shurtleff on Thursday. Thanks for listening, folks.